Something sinister is happening on the Polish-Belarusian border. The crossings are closed and the border is just packed with soldiers. Belarusians dreaming of crossing from Belarus to Poland and Europe are now, well, helpless. A human tide forms long queues. Hundreds of freight trucks wait, and even the Eastern Express trains cannot pass. China's trains, Belarus's trucks, Putin and Xi's dreams are all stuck in the same frame. It all started when Poland closed all land border crossings with Belarus indefinitely, effective midnight on September 12th. This was not retaliation, but purely a security measure. The decision was made following the Zapad 2025 joint exercises and the downing of Russian drones entering Polish airspace. At the same time, Lithuania and Estonia imposed partial restrictions in their own airspace. NATO increased its early warning and air patrol intensity on the eastern flank. The gate closed, the barrier rose, and the waiting line stretched for miles. The first scene captured on camera was taken at dawn on the Brest Terrace pole line, showing passenger cars and trucks lined up one after another. The sound of horns, frantic passenger conversations, and the rush to cross before the border window closed filled the air. This is not just a border incident, it is a blow to daily life, the economy, and the psychology of Belarusian society. And there are 3 victims of this closure: Belarusians, the government in Minsk, and Moscow. So why did Poland take such a harsh decision? 2 developments in the last week directly affected Warsaw's security compass. The first was the shooting down of Russian-made attack and reconnaissance drones that entered Polish airspace, passing over Belarusian territory. Polish F-16s and Dutch F-35s were scrambled. NATO's Italy-based early warning aircraft and multinational tanker aircraft took to the skies. Patriot batteries stationed in Germany were on high alert. Polish authorities announced that drones repeatedly violating Polish airspace were shot down. Press releases from the Dutch Ministry of Defense and NATO also confirmed that F-35s played a direct role in these operations. It was not disclosed exactly which weapons were used to shoot down the drones, but the standard air patrol configuration of F-16s and F-35s includes AI-120 class medium-range air-to-air missiles and close-in guns or CI strike options. It is likely that the drones were shot down with these. While the airspace was being scanned end-to-end, civilian flights were temporarily suspended and runways were closed at some airports. This was one of the harshest immediate response scenarios seen to date on NATO's eastern flank. The second development was Poland's military and physical reinforcement of its eastern border. The government simultaneously deployed tens of thousands of personnel, armored vehicles, reconnaissance units, and border guards to the land border, along with the permanent closure decision. Although the figures were shared piecemeal in official statements, Polish public media and regional press reported that around 40,000 soldiers and security personnel were deployed on the eastern border. Permanent fortifications and sensor networks were also included in the security system as part of the Eastern Shield project. Thus, the borderline has been transformed from a single phase to a multi-layered model against the risks of migration, smuggling, and infiltration. If the border is closed, who takes the first blow? The first blow hit those who pass through that gate every day with work permits, those with relatives on the other side, those going to medical appointments, and those who trade on a daily basis. When the closure was announced, queues formed overnight on the Belarusian side. Footage taken in the early hours of the morning shows families hurriedly stuffing belongings into luggage, drivers getting out of their vehicles to ask questions from a distance to border police, and children dozing off from exhaustion. It is difficult to give a definitive figure, but Belarusian and Russian media outlets and regional television stations reported that thousands of people tried to cross the border at once in the hours before the closure. Although Poland has exception procedures for humanitarian reasons, exceptions are far from a real solution in a regime where the gates are closed. Why are truck queues critical? Because Belarus's lifelines are not limited to oil and fertilizer exports. The supply of many products, spare parts, food, medicine, electronics, and construction machinery depends on wholesalers, distribution warehouses, and transit corridors on the EU side. The closure is forcing truck traffic to suddenly turn eastward. This creates 2 costs: distances increase and insurance and freight premiums rise. Moreover, considering that the fuel market within Russia has already been under pressure in recent months due to refinery fires, repair cycles, and temporary export bans, the fuel spare parts service triangle is becoming more expensive and irregular for the Belarusian TIR fleet. Supply plans will be revised, delivery dates will be extended, and losses of perishable goods will increase. Polish press and regional news channels reported that hundreds of trucks and over 1,000 passenger vehicles were waiting within the first 24 hours of the closure, with the queue spilling. into city traffic in some places. During the same period, even Belarusian state media acknowledged unusual congestion at some crossing points, which is a rare admission. The sudden closure of borders disrupts people's plans, but the real damage comes from uncertainty. If there is no answer to the question, when will the border gates open? All scheduled tasks, school registration, employment contracts, supply agreements, and hospital appointments are disrupted. Banking transactions are delayed. False alarms are triggered on card spending, and the inflow of cash in euros and dollars from abroad decreases. This scenario rapidly increases psychological tension in a country like Belarus, which is centrally planned and security-focused. Meanwhile, there is a donation campaign for Ukraine by United24 in the video description. If you want to take part in the fight for freedom, we are waiting for your support. Now, let's get back to our main topic. The question, should we stock up, circulates in people's kitchens, and a reflex to fill up fuel tanks out of caution emerges at city gas stations. Even without actual scarcity, the feeling of scarcity pushes prices up. Some people look for ways to leave Belarus. Some use legal visa channels, others take illegal paths. This possibility, it is not new. Since 2021, irregular crossing pressure along the Belarus-EU border has been increasing in waves. Monthly reports from the Polish Ministry of the Interior and Border Guard show that attempts at irregular crossings originating in Belarus have risen again throughout 2024 and 2025, with thousands of attempts recorded in a single month, including August 2025. Closing the border does not stop this traffic overnight. Instead, it changes the route, increasing both the risk and the cost. Geography, on the other hand, is kind of like an economics lesson. As alternatives diminish, bargaining power declines. With the door to the west closed, Belarus's goods and people are effectively forced to use Russia as their main exit and entry route. This increases the weight of ruble-based transactions, limits foreign exchange earnings, and honestly inflates logistics costs. In recent months, Russia's fuel market has been volatile, with sales quotas and queues appearing in some regions. This also affects Belarusian transporters and industrialists' access to fuel. Moreover, as sanctions controls tighten, the gray areas in re-exports and third-country routes are shrinking. As a result, Belarusian producers transport goods at higher costs over longer routes. Consumers see higher prices on store shelves, while currency shocks and inflation expectations widen the wage-price gap. What is Poland's 40,000-person deployment aiming to achieve? Maintaining a high number of ground forces serves three purposes. First, to establish a 24/7 reconnaissance and intervention cycle along the entire border. Border guards, gendarmerie, army units, and police are united under a single command and control network. Second, to deter irregular border crossings, barriers, sensors, patrols, and legal procedures for rapid adjudication and return in the field are activated. Third, to demonstrate symmetrical deterrence against large troop movements on the Belarusian side during Zapad-type exercises, such as camouflage tactical groupings, fire support elements near the borderline, and readiness for immediate response against drone swarms. Poland's Eastern Shield concept, launched in recent years, adds long-term infrastructure to these three objectives: permanent observation towers, road and bridge reinforcements, trench and barrier lines, and wide-area surveillance sensors. The tactical aspect of the closure decision is daily, but the strategic aspect of fortification is part of an annual plan. Videos taken before the closure show Belarusian license plates lining the roads, people waiting in line for toast and tea at roadside rest areas, and families walking near the border with baby strollers. Local opposition channels and Poland's Belarus-focused broadcasts aired these sequences one after another. In cases compiled by Medusa from the field, it was noted that on the day of the closure, nearly 1,500 vehicles waited in line for hours, while hundreds of trucks were parked in holding areas. TVP footage shows armored patrol vehicles, temporary checkpoints, and the distribution of drone and counter-drone equipment among the troops deployed to the border. These images also serve as the visual component of Warsaw's message, "We are ready," both to its domestic audience and the outside world. In the restricted airspace arrangement coinciding with military exercises on the Lithuania-Estonia axis, civilian routes were redrawn and temporary closure and correction announcements were made at several small airports. So, what is the source of the panic in Belarus? The answer actually comes with another question: the anxiety of what will happen tomorrow. A significant portion of Belarusians came into direct contact with mass arrests, police violence, dismissals, and stories of fleeing abroad during the 2020 to 2021 wave of protests. The indefinite closure of the border this time, on security grounds, revives that memory. The world of an ordinary Belarusian is tied to an economic and social routine: shopping, family visits, filling up with cheap gasoline, and bringing in or selling second-hand cars, parts, and phones from neighboring EU cities. The sudden halt to this routine reinforces the feeling of being locked in. Moreover, companies are forced to quickly reflect the cost difference in their prices. Imported products disappear from supermarket shelves, domestic equivalents become medicines and medical consumables are getting more expensive, and there's a noticeable delay in their supply. In an economy like Belarus, where wages are low and savings are limited, this shock instantly crushes household budgets. Keeping the border closed isn't just a matter of foreign policy for the Lukashenko administration, it's also an internal political risk. With the economy already overly dependent on Russia because of sanctions, the closure raises the overall cost to the economy while also increasing tension with the Kremlin. Poland's tough decision and NATO's joint intervention, well, they actually contradict Moscow's thesis that NATO's red lines are weak. The downing of drones and the closure of the border have three consequences for Russia. First, the lever extending to the European Union via Belarus weakens. The hybrid migration pressure and the gains from tactical tension at the border, well, they start to diminish. Secondly, NATO's joint reaction chain has been tested and honestly it appears to be operational. This increases the risk of new steps. Third, as the Belarusian economy becomes more fragile, Minsk's requests for assistance increase. This creates an additional burden on the Russian budget. Although Kremlin spokespeople describe the decisions as political and provocative, the reality on the ground shows that the nerve endings of European capitals are working faster this time. So, how did Poland shoot down the Russian drones and what systems were in place? Official reports didn't specify the type of ammunition. In cases like this, information about which missile is used is often classified. However, it has been confirmed that Dutch F-35S and Polish F-16S were deployed in joint sorties, and the threatening drones were destroyed in the air. The operation was supported by a NATO AWACS and a multinational tanker aircraft. German Patriot batteries stationed on the ground were on high alert and reinforced the air picture. This scenario brought together Poland's short to medium-range layer, like its F-16S and ground-based VSH networks, with NATO's long-range layer including F-35S, AWACS, tankers, and Patriots, all on the same screen. Jets typically use active radar-guided AIM-120 class missiles for similar missions. Cannon fire is also possible under suitable conditions, especially for low-speed, low-altitude targets. Poland also deploys electronic jamming and anti-drone teams in areas close to civilian settlements. However, confirmation of the hit came from air assets in this incident. It's true that Belarus-EU trade has areas where the impact of border closures isn't immediately visible but is suddenly felt within a few weeks. Health and education are clear examples. Some medicines and consumables come from the EU, even if equivalents are available in Russia. The quality, delivery time, and price triangle puts pressure on hospital management. International programs in schools, student-teacher exchanges, and academic exam certifications are also disrupted in cities. Simple questions like, "Our child is going on Erasmus. What will happen?" become more common. In the short term, most of these questions can't be answered with anything other than wait and see. As uncertainty increases, the visibility of internal security forces in the field also grows. Patrols become more frequent. Warnings on social media rise and reminders of legal consequences are issued in response to calls for protest. This visibility is on one hand a deterrent, on the other it signals deeper economic anxiety. The share of the police, army, and intelligence budgets increases, squeezing other items. If this lasts long, the cost of maintaining tranquility will rise further. Warsaw is managing this crisis within NATO as a multilateral file. Joint engagement in the drone incident and national discretion in the border closure decision. Pursuing these two lines simultaneously increases deterrence while, still controlling escalation. Poland is careful to stay on the same page with Berlin, The Hague, Rome, and Brussels. The Polish president's approval of NATO troop deployment in Poland has also strengthened the institutional layer of this joint stance. Although Poland describes the border closure as temporary, past experience shows that security-related measures rarely relax quickly. When read alongside Poland's land border decision, the partial airspace restrictions imposed by Lithuania and Estonia could turn Belarus's westward-facing door into a regime lasting for months. This pushes Minsk closer to Moscow while prioritizing bilateral channels with Beijing and third countries. However, this unfolds in stages. First, the border remains closed and exception crossing schemes are developed for certain categories. Truck traffic is redirected eastward. Belarus's domestic market is calmed through price controls and subsidies. The market slows down but does not necessarily collapse. Second, drone violations and reconnaissance attempts continue. NATO and Poland's joint response hardens and Belarus's border management becomes stricter. In this scenario, the feeling of being in a locked room grows inside Belarus. Third, Minsk requests a commercial humanitarian corridor and backdoor contacts with EU capitals. In return, it promises technical cooperation on security and migration management. This reduces economic tension but tests Moscow's patience. Ultimately, Poland's decision to indefinitely close its border with Belarus, along with NATO's air defense and air patrol response, signals a new era in Belarus-EU relations. For the Belarusian people, the meaning is simple. The road has become longer, uncertainty has increased, and life has become more expensive. For Minsk, the meaning is more complicated. Maintaining internal calm now requires more money, more control, and more propaganda. For Moscow, the effectiveness of the Belarus lever has decreased, while NATO's eastern flank has proven its ability to respond with a rapid joint reaction. There's no single winner in this equation, but the losers are the ordinary people waiting at the border, those wanting to fill up their car's tank, bring medicine home, or send their child to school. So, what do you think about this issue? Please share your thoughts in the comments. To stay updated on new videos, subscribe to our channel and don't forget to turn on